Hello everyone, my name is Jason and welcome to my project. What you're about to see and hear was prepared for a college course as part of a team capstone project. The views expressed here are my own and intended solely for this project. This presentation is for the January 2015 Nuclear Energy Engineering Technology course at Thomas Edison State College. There have been 128 nuclear power plants built for commercial power use in the United States. However, no new nuclear plants have come online since 1996. What happened in this industry to slow the growth of this once promising energy sector? Was it a change in public perception following nuclear accidents like 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl? Did the government change their approach to regulating the nuclear industry? Are we at the starting line of a nuclear energy renaissance? The research project that we selected for our research assignment is Nuclear Renaissance, Fact or Fiction. The focus of this presentation will be to review the history of nuclear power in the U.S., identify what happened that led to the reduction of growth of new nuclear power plants in the U.S., and ultimately predict whether a nuclear renaissance is fact or fiction. At the turn of the 20th century, science was leading the way for innovations on many different fronts, such as medicine, transportation, energy, and even warfare. An early pioneer of the innovation of energy was Ernest Rutherford. Building upon the earlier discoveries of the atom, he had a vision about harnessing its energy. He wrote, "If it were ever possible to control at will the rate of disintegration of the radio elements, an enormous amount of energy could be obtained from a small amount of matter." The vision of Rutherford and others like him led to brilliant discoveries. Two discoveries that advanced our understanding of energy are fission and the self-sustaining chain reaction. Fission is the splitting of an atomic nucleus resulting in the release of large amounts of energy. A self-sustaining chain reaction occurs when the energy released from fission creates energy that results in subsequent fission or fissions. Following the discovery of the self-sustaining chain reaction, the focus of the early work in nuclear power was towards the development of a weapon. After World War II, this focus shifted towards using nuclear power for peaceful purposes. On December 8, 1953, President Eisenhower delivered a transitional speech in front of the United Nations that discussed the move from obtaining a nuclear weapon to creating commercial electricity from nuclear energy, known as Atoms for Peace. In his speech, he said, "So my country's purpose is to help us move out of this dark chamber of horrors into the light, to find a way by which the minds of men, the hopes of men, the souls of men everywhere can move forward toward peace and happiness and well-being." The pictures in this slide show the transition of nuclear energy, from the bombs used in World War II to the first commercial nuclear power plant, Shippingport Atomic Power Station. Since the transition of Atoms for Peace, the world has brought nuclear power out of the darkness and into the light. This chart shows the world growth of commercial nuclear by decade. In the 1950s, 11 plants began operation, and in the next decade, 75 plants. The highest number of nuclear plants entered operation during the 1980s. However, the following decades saw a decrease in the number of new plants. Looking more closely at the U.S. nuclear industry, this chart shows the U.S. growth of commercial nuclear by decade. Notice that the highest number of plants entered operation in the 1970s, but this rate of growth slowed in the 1980s and then again in the 90s. Also notice that no new commercial plants have entered operation in the last 2 decades. Why do you think that the growth in commercial nuclear power slowed in the United States? In the next section, I will review some of the events that may explain this trend. As previously stated, the initial desire for energy was the development of the atomic bomb. Fortunately, the collective minds of the United Nations created the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The intent of this pact was to discourage any country from developing new nuclear weapons and to encourage those already in possession towards disarmament. In 1974, this peaceful movement was challenged when India detonated a weapon. By the mid-1970s, non-proliferation was the subject of most nuclear conversations. Someone had to do something to discourage developing nations from a future nuclear war. On April 7, 1977, President Jimmy Carter implemented aggressive actions to show the world that these behaviors were not in the interests of peaceful nuclear states. In his nuclear policy statement, Carter wrote, "There is no dilemma today more difficult to resolve than that connected with the use of nuclear power. Many countries see nuclear power as the only real opportunity, at least in this century, to reduce the dependence of their economic well-being on foreign oil, an energy source of uncertain availability, growing price, and ultimate exhaustion. The U.S., by contrast, has a major domestic source, coal, but its use is not without penalties, and our plans also call for the use of nuclear power as a share in our energy production. The benefits of nuclear power are thus very real and practical, but a serious risk accompanies worldwide use of nuclear power. The risk that components of the nuclear power process will be turned to providing atomic weapons." Following Carter's policy, you could see in this slide a change analysis that shows the before and after effects of this policy. An example was the closing of a commercial fuel reprocessing facility. Without the ability to complete the nuclear fuel cycle, a new problem developed: what to do with spent nuclear fuel. The effects of the 1977 nuclear policy statement are best summarized by Dr. A. David Rawson, a nuclear industry expert, in his paper titled U.S. Policy on Spent Fuel Reprocessing, The Issues. He states, "Some other nations went ahead with reprocessing and breeder development, but high costs and loss of political support delayed plans in many nuclear projects around the world. The U.S. never regained its technological lead in nuclear energy development. Its own nuclear power program had already gone from orders to cancellations, and the dream of long-term future energy security from breeder reactors faded away. The 3 years of uncertainty about the future had wiped away further prospects for private investments in the nuclear fuel cycle. Today, 20 years later, all U.S. spent fuel remains stored at each plant where it was used." On March 28, 1979, Unit 2 of 3 Mile Island experienced an event leading to the partial core melt of the reactor. To date, many people in the U.S. were unaware of the potential dangers of a nuclear disaster, and this event shook the confidence of the surrounding community and the public in general. On the left side of this slide is a change analysis that shows the before and after effects of this event. While the after actions improved the design, safety, emergency preparedness, training, and operational performance of U.S. nuclear reactors, little could be done to improve the utilities' incentives for bringing new commercial nuclear to the market. Around the U.S., those sites already under construction were continued. However, few new plants were started due to the rising design costs and reduced public confidence. It may be clear what happens to slow the growth of nuclear in the U.S. The changed U.S. policy towards nuclear and the U.S. nuclear event that occurred at 3 Mile Island. In the next section, I will look at what has been learned and where the industry is going today. Despite the slowed growth in nuclear, other countries have continued to build and run new plants. This chart shows the projected nuclear growth in countries around the world, including the U.S. Notice that the expected number of new nuclear plants is double of those in operation. For instance, 436 in operation today compared to 898 expected in the future, that is, those anticipated to be built combined with those already in operation. Also notice that the projected rate of growth seems small in the United States when compared to the world. For instance, 104 in operation today in the United States compared with 136 expected. Potentially, the reason for this is that the designs of nuclear are improving. In other words, you do not need as many facilities to produce the equivalent amount of power. This is because the reactor designs are improving in safety, efficiency, and capacity. This timeline on this chart shows the evolution from Generation 1 designs of the 1950s to Generation 4 designs that have yet to be constructed. This chart shows the number of U.S. plants by the different types of reactor designs. Notice that the only two designs still in operation today are the boiling water reactor and the pressurized water reactor designs. These designs are largely Generation 2, which originated during the 1960s. Despite having an almost 50-year-old design, 34 out of 45 boiling water reactors remain in operation today. That is roughly 75.6%. And 65 of 81 pressurized water reactors remain in operation, which is 80.2%. In addition, the majority of those plants in operation have received license extensions through at least the next 15 years. The safe, reliable, and carbon-free energy provided by U.S. nuclear plants has become a mainstay of U.S. energy industry. Because of the U.S. nuclear industry's ability to operate safely, the public perception of those who favor nuclear has improved. This graphic shows the trend from 1983 through 2013. The percentage of the public who favor continued or future nuclear is shown in light blue circles, while those who oppose continued or future nuclear are shown in tan circles. If the industry has proven that they are capable of safely operating nuclear plants, and the public is also in favor of continued operation, then where is the U.S. nuclear industry heading? A moment ago, we stated that new nuclear plants are being built in the U.S., such as those at V.C. Summer and Vogtle, and others are being planned around the U.S., but there are many other options. Looking at the Department of Energy's 2015 budget request shows promise. Supercritical transformational electric power generation, also known as STEP, S-T-E-P, which is an improved energy cycle applicable to both nuclear and fossil technologies, offers a lot of promise. Advanced reactor technologies that consider alternatives to uranium as a fuel and water as a moderator are also being considered. Fuel reprocessing to recycle plutonium and uranium from both nuclear weapons and spent nuclear fuel. And lastly, small modular reactors that minimize the high initial build costs and support smaller energy needs. In summary, we have discussed the history of nuclear, investigated what happened to slow the growth of nuclear in the U.S., and considered whether a renaissance was possible. The vision of Ernest Rutherford was to harness the power of the atom. In the U.S. and around the world, we have done exactly that. A proven record of accomplishments combined with the 21st century technology will sustain nuclear today and start the renaissance tomorrow. What do you believe? I appreciate your attention today and hope you've enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.